Okay.
Rich Licata, to those unaware of your impressive resume, let me just state this loudly and clearly. We are in the presence right now, viewers, of one of the Emmy gods. You were there at the creation of this whole game, Rich, and you played a key role in it. So before we proceed with this theme of our show here, which is how to win an Emmy, take us back in time to you and Quentin Schaffer, the whole HBO days, the Rogers and Cowan days. Set that up for us, how we got to today.
Okay, I remember being at HBO in the late '80s and kind of frustrated because we were making a lot of really terrific programming at the time, and yet we were kind of relegated to the Cable Ace Awards. During that period, and I wondered why we didn't get more Emmy love. HBO was doing a lot of terrific, movies around that time. So I wrote an email to the chairman of the company at the time, Michael Fuchs, and I said I had this really terrific idea. I would love to, what I thought was terrific, I would love to approach one of the video houses in Los Angeles and go in and say to them, listen, I will give you some of our choice shows if ATAS members show you their membership cards. Would you parcel them out? And in exchange, I will take out ads and I will put your logo at the bottom. And both 2020, for those of you who live in Los Angeles and I've been here for a while, the 2020 stores and the following year Blockbuster both love the idea, and that's how the cassette mailing thing started with cable.
Wow!
And it was very exciting because we got a lot of attention for it in the press. And that first year, the Josephine Baker story got nominated, and Lynn Whitfield actually won. So that was kind of like the break-in.
Okay, and then we get to the point where everybody's wise to this. The Academy participates, and what's unusual, as you and I know, is that over at the Oscars, they do not get involved in actually helping the contenders get their product to the voters. They just stand back and set certain rules and then let consultants handle it. But at the Emmys, they actually say, all right, if you want to reach our voters, we will send the packages out to you. There will be fees, but they handle it, and there are rules. And as soon as that system was set up, then all of a sudden we saw the big boxes come in.
Right.
And HBO now sends 2 of them per season. But when did that all start?
It was a gradual escalation. We started to do it at HBO. I think the other networks and studios started to see the results that we were getting, and they started to tiptoe into it. But what they realized very early on was that it was a very expensive proposition. And one of the sad things that I discovered years later when I was at Rogers and Cowan and handling people's campaigns were, a lot of producers would come to me and say, I have this really terrific movie that I want you to take a look at, and can we do a campaign for it? And I would go back to them and say, it is a terrific movie, but it's going to cost you at least $50,000 to get into the game. Or more. And so a lot of very creative people and creative shows, just couldn't make it into the mix. I think over the years it got way too out of hand because in people's attempt to make things very attractive, and when you have, like 50 things on your office floor that, you have to watch to be a responsible voter, you want to create things that are going to kind of get the attention of the voters. So things got kind of out of hand and elaborate. I remember one year I had to actually lay something out on the floor to see what it was. And that's when the idea of going online and bringing your product online, kind of dawned on us, where we could do this in a much more financially responsible way and an ecological way. And that happened in the mid 2000s. Well, actually, like 2005 or six.
Yeah, and this is when you were still at Showtime. You did this.
Yeah, when I was at Showtime, where it was time to kind of come up with the times and do something that was a service to the members, and also it didn't empty the bank.
But you also did send out a DVD this year to the voters as well, so you gave them that option because you have to be cautious. Not as certainly as we know, it's the geezers in the Academy are not the most technologically savvy people. You need to cover your base with older media means like DVDs to some extent, right?
No, you're right. I mean, you have to be sensitive to all the members of the Academy. So we send out a couple of episodes of our top product, and then as everybody knows, we have a passcode now where you can go into our NBC screening room and see every episode of every show that we have on the air. And I'm very happy to see that the Academy has also adapted that, as have other networks. So hopefully this year there'll be even less DVDs that are mailed out and that you feel you're overwhelmed with.
Okay, what's the best month to reach out to voters, Rich? Because let me explain to voters here. You pioneered what used to be the earliest shipment ever to Academy voters, which was the year of Huff. You had sent a whole package back in January, and you ended up with 7 nominations and a win for Blythe Danner. And so it was amazing for a show people didn't even know was on the air. You got a lot of Emmy love. And then meanwhile, compare that to late April or so, which is the time when HBO tends to send its DVDs out. You now come out in late February or early March. What is your schedule now?
This year we sent out our passcodes in February, actually early February. And it's been designed for years to do one thing, to avoid like the crash at the end of May and the beginning of June. So on a lazy weekend, you can go into our screening room and catch up on episodes of 30 Rock, or The Office, or whatever other shows that we have. And I think it takes the pressure off the voters. And I think that we've seen a lot of different shows slowly emerge into the competitive landscape, and I think it's because of that exposure early on. If AMC is doing it earlier, FX has done it earlier over the years, and there isn't the monopoly of one network getting all the nominations.
Okay, so you got to get out earlier, which I agree with.
Right.
What about the traditional ways of reaching voters, which include ads, billboards, and you, of all people, love to try unique, catchy ways to get their attention, including wrapping these double-decker buses that go up and down Sunset Boulevard. Take us to that stage. Generally, you need to be in Emmy magazine, right? Or do you?
Yeah, Emmy magazine is it's the Bible for the 15,000 members of the Television Academy. If you're looking to get attention for your product, it should be in that book. Now, having said that, my bone of contention has been you go through Emmy magazine, which I have to say is probably one of the most gorgeous magazines out there. I mean, Gail Polivoy and Juan Morales have really given that magazine a renaissance. But when you go through that magazine in June, there are a sea of ads. And I'm not sure how you differentiate yourself, in that environment. So you need to branch out and do other things that will, get attention for your product. So what we have done is, we've, as you mentioned, we wrap the buses, and we've have digital billboards, all over town. Years ago, I've took ads out of the envelope in the LA Times and started to do them exclusively in the LA Times calendar section. And one of the chief reasons was because we were the only ones in the calendar section. So we've gone on to making it available on all mobile devices. Actually, this week we're going to be making we came up with this really fun idea that will expose our product even more from a digital standpoint, and you'll be hearing about that in a couple of days. So it's all about total impact, and so that ultimately it drives people back to the website, so that the screening room, so that they will watch the product and vote for it.
Now, at the screening room, do you make available all episodes or just select ones?
All episodes. You could see a whole season of any one of our shows.
The great debate that goes on among your rivals who rely exclusively on DVDs is how many episodes to include in the mailing. So there are people, companies like AMC, that give you up to 5. The HBO package only includes 1 or 2 episodes per show. They feel the need to be democratic and offer everything, of course, so they send out this monster box that has just a little sampling of everything in there. But then they send out a second box later in May with kind of the last TV movies and things like, they'll do that with Liberace this year and so forth. But do you believe in, if you were just doing the DVD route, and the reason I'm asking this is because I want this video to apply to people who don't have the budget that an NBC does or an HBO does. If they just want to, get out there and they're struggling to get the attention of voters, is it okay just to send a couple episodes, or do you need more? Is more better?
I think more is always better. I think that a couple is sufficient. And I have an example that I think will work here. We have this show called Parenthood, which is really quite extraordinary. We did 15 episodes this year. And we're not sending out, the 15 episodes, but there is one performance this year that was, I would say, in the past 10 years, probably one of the strongest that I've seen, and it's by Monica Potter, who plays, a wife and mother who is battling breast cancer. So what we did is, because there are several episodes over the life of this season that she appears in an ensemble cast, we put together a compilation of her scenes. And actually, it plays really nicely. It's 30 minutes of Monica's best scenes, and I think that is, and we're putting that in the NBC screening room, and also, it's actually Monica herself is going to be sending it out to, and her representatives is going to be sending it out to the Academy members. But I think, to answer your question, it is going to give the TV Academy members a real forensic look at a show and a performance that doesn't span 15 episodes, but in 30 minutes it will give you an idea of how terrific that show is.
Let's talk about this. You guys are in charge with doing the campaigns for shows, but when it gets down to these thousands of actors and writers and directors that you have, they often need to be strategic on their own. I'm glad to hear Monica is being proactive this way. What about other people within specific branches? Let's say there's a writer for whatever the show it is, or an actor in this and that. They can, as an option, can't they, strike a deal with the Academy just to target a certain branch with so much that they want them to see, and specifically hone in on that kind of campaign. And often it works at times, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, thank God that the Academy lets them, kind of filter out, whatever branch their expertise is. Um, we've at the beginning of a season, which was about a month ago, I wrote a letter to all the writers, directors, producers of all of our shows, telling them what our plans were as a network, and also encouraging them to complement, whatever our efforts were through their branches. And we've also set up an advisory committee here at NBC, which is led by Kurt King, so that talent can feel very comfortable to come to us and ask us questions, because they all think it's very, very complicated, and they are absolutely right. And we try to simplify it for them so that they can make plans and budget whatever they have to budget, so that they can formulate a campaign for themselves. And we're talking about choreographers and writers and cinematographers, and it's all about kind of galvanizing all the creative people on a show to try to get the attention at Emmy time in a very crowded television landscape.
Also, you need to be strategic, of course, with category placement. Monica Potter is certainly a good example of that you could find a very good rationale for putting her in either lead or supporting. They need that kind of guidance too, don't they?
They do. And actually, we met with Monica, and I mean that's a terrific example, because her performance has leading lady qualities to it. But because she is part of an ensemble, we looked at the competition in both the leading category and the supporting categories, and we made a decision where we thought she would get the most attention.
And what's that decision?
And the decision is we're going to enter her into outstanding supporting actress in a drama series. And I think that she will hold up, rather well. And if she gets nominated, there's a chance that the Blue Ribbon panelists, could vote for her.
Yes, it's all about getting into that panel, because then you have to pick a sample episode, and this is what Gold Derby likes to specialize in.
You guys are great.
Breaking that news of who's entering what, evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of all of that, and people don't know. It's astounding to me. You could go back to the Susan Lucci example at the daytime Emmys. What she thought was good acting was loud screaming and wailing, and only when finally she deferred to her writers to pick the episode, and then all of a sudden she realized, oh, wait a minute, my peers who are judging in this category want to see a range of what I can do. They want to see that big money scene, the big pow scene, and a good episode submission should have both of those things.
Well, I will tell you, there is no one better than your team at evaluating performances like that. I say that in all sincerity. And actually, Tom, you've taught me a lot about how to look at performances over the breadth of a whole season. I'm certainly not as good at it as you and your team, but I'm much more conscious of it now. And you and I have talked about this over drinks and dinner, where great shows and great performances have been ignored because the wrong episode was chosen to enter into the competition. And it's some of the big shows that we've all known and loved through the years.
Right, and sometimes it matters a lot, and it results in them losing if they're this dumb enough to hand in a bad submission, or sometimes it doesn't matter at all, and that's the absolute bewildering part of this, because Rich, every year, as you know, we look at all these episodes, and we're all trying to get to the bottom of the mystery of that variety series category. Why does Jon Stewart keep winning? And I'll tell you, he has, in many cases, handed in his absolute worst episode. I think the last 2 to 3 years, he could not have chosen worse in terms of the bottom of the barrel, as if he's deliberately trying to lose. I don't believe that's his strategy. I think he's just showing just contempt for the process. Just pull he pulls something out of a barrel and goes with it. But it's proof of just sometimes it doesn't matter about the episode, but it often does.
Well, you bring up a very interesting point, and it's about the voting habits of the members, and I think a lot of the members have very, very active careers, and we're all kind of battling not having enough hours in a day. And I'm just wondering whether there is, a real focus on the voting when the ballots show up, or do people vote out of habit? And this is something that a lot of us in this business have talked about. I think there should be some kind of campaign for to target to members, to implore them to please, really take stock in what you're voting for. Did that performance that you voted for last year really hold up another year? And the same goes for that show. I mean, how many times have you heard, God, that one again? Like, how did that, win, 2 and 3 times? And I think everybody has to take a fresh look every season at what they're voting for.
Now, part of the strategy of winning also has to come down with category placement. To step back a second here, and you, Rich, you are the devil of category designation because you are unafraid of crossing lines when they're very blurry. And I'm referring to, what I'm referring to, Nurse Jackie.
Falco.
And that was obviously one of your most clever, brilliant moves of all time, because most people, let me say this, in fairness before I jump on you here, most people would say that Nurse Jackie is a drama. But you made this argument, twisted though it seemed to me, that it's nonetheless a comedy. And by doing so, you shrewdly moved it out of that battle which she could not have won on the drama side over to comedy, where she won. And it was I must say, a masterstroke on your part.
Well, thank you. But it wasn't the first time that I had some connection to a decision like that. Back in the late 90s, I had gotten a call from my friend John Kelly at USA Network in November of whatever year that was. And he said to me, listen, I just got this new show in called Monk, and would you take a look at it over the weekend, because I think we'd like you to work on this show. And I looked at it, and it was right before the Golden Globe balloting period. And I called him back that Monday, and I said, you know what? It's really terrific. I said, but I kind of thought it was funny. I think you should put it in the comedy category for the Golden Globes. And he said, okay, fine. And 2 weeks later, it was nominated for Tony Shalhoub was nominated for Best Comedy Actor, and a month later he won. And so we've armed with the Golden Globe, we shepherded Tony Shalhoub into the Emmys that year in the comedy category. And what did he win? 4 times in a row?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
so
the irony of your career, Rich, is that you started off on the cable side at a time when broadcast couldn't lose and cable couldn't win, and now you're over on the broadcast side at NBC, and you're facing a game that's stacked to cable. We saw last year drama series. Every single one of the nominees for Best Drama Series was a cable show. What do you think of the whole shift?
Well, I think it is indicative of what's going on in television. I don't think there has ever been a time where there has been more terrific television. It's very exciting to be in this business. Having said that, the tide turns very quickly, and shows that are are really terrific on broadcast TV that don't find an audience die very quickly so that they can be replaced with, new hopefuls. And it's, I mean, one example that I thought of since I'm here at NBC, which is 19 months now, we had this show called Awake, which was really a terrific, smart show. And had it been produced at Showtime, the lead actor would have been nominated for an Emmy. But because the show was canceled, it kind of was, eliminated from the whole process. So it's it's kind of sad, but it's the reality of the business.
Looking back over all the campaigns you've been part of, and the ones that we have not mentioned so far in this chat, which ones are you most proud of? I mean, I imagine when you first got those series nominations for Weeds and Dexter at Showtime, that had to be just thrilling because it was the first time that they got into the race. And then you were actually still at Showtime when Homeland was bubbling up. So its eventual victory in that category, you can bear some input into early on. What else can you look at?
I have to say, you get to a certain age and a time in this business where you have to be grateful. I have had an embarrassment of riches when it comes to this this part of my career. I remember the thrill of the Josephine Baker getting nominated for Best Movie, and it was the first time that I believe that a pay television movie was nominated. And then I remember in September of 2003, which was probably one of the real joyful career moments, when HBO won the most Emmy awards and trumped all broadcast for the first time. Certainly The Shield is up there. I think working for FX and with John Solberg, that was a thrill. Monk was another one, and then of course Showtime. What you mentioned was it was a thrill. It's nice to pioneer and come up with a strategy and and make the company that you work for look terrific.
Well, let's go back to The Shield for a second and put that into its context, because that was a major breakthrough in terms of victories, because it was the first time cable TV, non-subscriber cable TV, basic cable, had won in a major category. So, wow, that was, I'm talking about his Best Actor win that year.
Well, yeah, and also it's, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but before I lose my thought, it really helped brand a network. And, a lot of times I'm asked, what is the value of an Emmy? And, it can have some financial value because, you can sell shows internationally. And, if they have the Emmy win, they can garner some more, financing. But in the case of The Shield, it really put that network on the map. And I think Monk's win really put USA on the map. So they're really this. I think there's great value in the gold.
Lastly, last question.
Lastly, we're not going to talk more?
I've got to run off and meet another one of you campaigners here for lunch. But we should pick this up in a part 2 after we garner reactions to part 1. As our sign-off summary here, what are the essentials that you believe a contender should do, even on a modest budget, to win an Emmy? The absolute must-dos.
They need to identify their best work in the season. They need to scan the promotional landscape and see what they can afford, and strategize where they can get the biggest bang out of their buck. I think they should do press. I think editorial is very, very important in positioning somebody's performance or project, and that does include, the trades and the consumer papers, and I think they have to do some praying.